and it did change my career when I came back to doing furniture again. And instruments, I somehow started to get more work that involved photography.
Okay, so here I am in Bridport, and I was on holiday with Ali, and we bumped into Dan Williams here, whom I haven't seen for about 30 years. And actually, Dan is a charango and quattro maker, amongst other things. Tell me a little bit about how you started making charangos.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I mean, gosh, it was France the last time we saw each other.
Yeah,
Gerald,
I
wasn't
know,
it?
it was about 35, 40 years ago.
Well, goes back a bit, but I think probably instrument making for me, I grew up in a family of musicians, so I'd made electric guitars before I studied furniture making.
Yeah.
As a little bit of a sort of hobby, get me out of school thing, and then years later I wanted to travel in South America, and I didn't want to go there without learning some Spanish, so I took off to Spain in my Renault 5, and I had a contact there in Madrid, a musician friend who I'd met on an earlier adventure, and so I went to stay with him, and he introduced me to somebody who made a big impression on me as a musician and a maker, a chap called Antonio Restucci. And I stayed in Madrid, and I visited Antonio, and he was making, from the offcuts from the guitar making industry, which at that time was quite busy in Spain. He would make charangos and quattros. He also was a great guitar player and mandolin player. And in his top floor flat, right in the middle of Madrid, he lived with an artist friend, and I used to spend the afternoon there chatting and watching what he was up to. And before I left, he very kindly let me draw around some of his instruments.
Right.
And make a copy of...
So let's have a little look at what you originally did.
Okay, so so on one side of this paper, you've got this is the artist friend of his who did this rather lovely drawing.
Wonderful. I think I know her actually. No.
I wish I did. And yes, I think her address is written down here actually.
Yes, thank you.
And on the other side, these are the plans that I made by drawing around Antonio's instruments.
Right. So that's a charango.
This is a charango here. It's all very faint, and it's 20, 30 years old, so you probably can hardly see it. And that's a quattro.
Yeah.
And this is something very important called the table of constants. That is a method of determining fret positions with different scale lengths.
I see.
So I painstakingly wrote all this out in an attempt to improve my Spanish, begin my musical instrument making, and hopefully meet Loretta. But here I am, sort of 30 years on, and I still spend a lot of time drawing beautiful women.
Yeah,
and, I do actually.
You lucky thing. Yeah.
And making musical instruments, or attempting to improve my instrument
Well,
skills.
let's have a little look at and you can tell me the difference between a charango and a quattro. Okay, so let's start with the charango. Let's have a look at one of yours.
Okay, this is actually the first one I made. Charango number 1, 1992 is written inside. It's been remade a couple of times, and as I've learned a bit more about them, after I travelled in. Later, I went to Bolivia and visited somebody who's very important to the history of the charango and the playing of it, a chap called Ernest Cavor.
Yeah.
And this instrument is essentially a Bolivian instrument. It's played a lot in Chile and Bolivia and Peru.
Right.
So it's an Andean derivation of the guitar, which originally came from the wide variety of armadillo animals that they
So it was originally made out of armadillo or tortoise sometimes?
I think, the Ron Rocco is more like a tortoise, I believe. But they're all different sizes, from very small ones up to large instruments.
And the tuning is interesting, isn't it?
The tuning's very interesting. It's G, C, E, A, E.
Let's hear it. so it's very Andean sounding, isn't it?
Yeah, so it gives you all that.
Fantastic. And you were telling me a story about when you were in Chile?
In Bolivia.
In Bolivia, yeah. With about the different tunings of the charango.
Well, that's right. Ernest has an amazing museum.
Yes.
Excuse me, in La Paz. And when I visited it, he told me, I interviewed him, and he told me that there were, I believe, almost 30 recognised variant tunings of the charango, and that the reason for this was largely because the instrument was used in a seduction ceremony in what are called huaynos, or the playing of huaynos, which are old traditional Bolivian songs, folk songs, which go back long before the Spanish ever came. And when the Spanish arrived and brought these guitars, and people started to, and eventually invented all these smaller versions of guitars. See, the Spanish brought strings. There were no strings before they came. It became, I don't know what was used before it, possibly a flute or some sort of drum, but it became the most used instrument in this little seduction ceremony, in which women gather and sing in harmony together. And next to this, indoors, is a sort of what's very like a cider house with straw bales, chicha, which is the kind of wine that they drink, and lots of men.
So you were at one of these, weren't you? Yeah.
I was at one of these events, not quite knowing what was happening, but hoping that I was going to experience what Ernest had primed me up to. And sure enough, you know, we drank quite a lot of this wine and played music for a while, and then suddenly from outside you could hear these beautiful voices of 3 or 4 women gathered together singing huaynos, and then very shortly after that, all the young attractive charango players from inside the chicheria sort of went outside and started walking around this circle of women
playing charangos.
Playing the charangos in completely different tunings, and the recording I've got is, you know, it's a dreadful sound basically, but you can hear this wonderful harmonic singing through it, and then at a certain point, 2-3 minutes in, the women seem to focus on one player whose tuning they liked,
right,
and the other guys just came back in for more chicha.
So they just retired and left the other guy to it.
Yeah.
And then did they perform?
Well, they go, they meanwhile play a bit of music, but they usually just seem to be drinking and listening to the singing and playing that's going on outside.
Yeah.
But you know, they get another chance later on.
Oh, good. Okay, well, I'm glad that everybody has a go. So this is the origin of the different tunings. You have to be in tune to the women singing.
I think that's right. Yeah. As I understood that was a really lovely part of the trip, and definitely one of the most interesting things about music. I brought Ernest's book back.
Oh, right.
Which is called The Charango, and has photographs of the most amazing. I mean, there's one in here somewhere that's enormous. It looks as big as a Mexican guitarron. God knows where they found it.
It's a big armadillo.
It's some huge sort of armadillo. No, I think it's actually a wooden one that somebody made.
Okay.
So
it's like a bass charango.
Yeah.
So you have different tunings, different sizes.
Different scale lengths will get, and body sizes are going to mean, I guess you've got the whole gamut of different, a bit like the balalaika or
mandolin.
Yeah.
Tell me about this other instrument now.
Okay.
That you've been making. Let's have a look.
Which one?
The quattro.
The quattro. Okay. So, so Ernest inspired me. Just to finish about the charango. Ernest inspired me to make this, which is I was travelling in Africa and found this gourd, which they use for making lots of instruments in Africa and India, and I've been experimenting making charangos using.
So that's a charango made out of an African gourd.
Yeah.
Great. Why not?
And there's more things sort of coming along like that. Okay, quattros.
But you've made a lot of quattros, haven't you?
I have. Quattros are really like, in my feeling about them, they're most similar to the ukulele, although the tuning's a bit different. But I'll get this one. this is a short scale length one, and I moved on to making a longer scale length.
Right.
They're tuned in D sixth, and it's re-entrant, similar to the ukulele.
Yeah.
So instead of going, my dog has fleas, it loosely goes, my flea has dogs.
Yes. Okay. Right. Yes.
Reversal of the same notes, but.
And what country is it from?
Okay, so Quattros come from. They are a region called the Orinoco Basin. 3 provinces of Colombia and a couple of parts of Venezuela.
Right.
But the music is very particular to an area where they flatland savanna, where they farm cattle and perform and sing jarocho, which is a lot of it has a lot of improvised singing in it, and contrapuntear they call it, where 2 singers will compete almost to an accompaniment of harp, cuatro, maracas, and cajon, which is a sort of box that the Spanish took back from Peru. Yes, so it's a very rhythmic instrument. It is a harmony instrument, but it's not very much used for picking out melodies. So it gets, you have this very. Lots of slaps, lots of.
Well, we heard when Antonio Lauro came to London, his daughter came along, Natalia, and she played Quattro with him on stage in the Wigmore Hall. That's the.
Well, she's regarded as one of the best Quattro players around.
Is she?
She's very famous, certainly. I went to Colombia earlier this year,
right,
and many people knew about her. And I was at a big annual event, a rodeo, where they all these groups come, and
fantastic.
So it was great to see. For many years I've wanted to go and participate or see where the Quattro really originated, because Simon Jeffs, who I met years ago in London, got me excited about this after I came back from Spain and seeing Antonio's ones and started making them, because Simon was writing pieces for them with the Penguin Cafe Orchestra.
Right, yes, that's exactly.
And so I went and met him a couple of times, and some of the tunes, the things that they were doing were very simple little.
Fantastic, yeah.
Simple melody lines like that,
to
and then they'd become this kind of repetitive patterns for a Penguin Cafe song.
Wow.
So I loved all that, and I thought it seemed to me that it was an instrument that could have a lot more potential than just a. Although I love the Venezuelan folk and Colombian folk instrument use of it, I thought it could perhaps spread out in a way that, in fact, the ukulele has done. I suppose
in a big way. Tell me a little bit about the construction of this, because you showed me an instrument just now which had a much thinner bridge.
Okay, so every time I've made batches of, I like to make them in batches. Because you can compare them at the end. And I try and keep the best ones and sell the others. Doesn't always work that way, but every time I meet a maker or a player and I come across another Quattro or talk about the subject of sound and amplification of sound in a box with strings on it, I'm always open to the idea there might be something I haven't learned yet.
Sure.
And the latest modification, which came from, who was that? Yes, it was a Venezuelan chap I met at a festival in Wales a couple of years, 2-3 years ago, and he said that the bridge, and I'll have to get the one to show you.
Well, yes. Well,
the width of the bridge, this way, inhibit or stiffen the soundboard in this area. So having a wide bridge meant a stiffer soundboard and subsequently less low frequency, less bass notes, less warmth to the instrument. And So I've now made that's the latest kind of modification, but that's one in a whole series of slight changes that have taken place over the years.
So you're a quattro innovator, actually.
I think I'm just doing what other musical instrument makers do naturally, which is just to keep adding things, augmenting the whole nature, and just I'm not sure. It'd be interesting to meet someone who's wasted as much of their life making quattros as I have. It's quite an academic thing, but it feels in some way, I've always treated it a little bit as though I'm serving an incredibly long apprenticeship towards making a classical guitar.
I was just going to say, have you ever made a guitar?
No.
So you're about to, aren't you?
And I've just actually been commissioned by an Italian chap who is a keen player.
Yeah.
And it's a nice project because it combines various things, but it will mean that I get to spend a couple of months living and working in a commune in Spain, which is a place I'm very fond of.
Fantastic.
And I shall make it there with some of the people from the village.
Wonderful. So you'll all be taking part in making this instrument.
That's the idea. Even the children in the village will come and
that's
learn
lovely.
how to.
And it's a gift for the village.
And it's a gift for the village from this.
Yeah.
He's the father of one of the people who lives in the village and wanted to.
That's just such a great project to do. Yeah.
I'm really excited.
Well, it's really nice to meet you. But before we finish, I'm just rather interested in your obsession with choras. You can tell me a bit about it. Should we walk over and have a look at this thing? All right. So, tell me a little bit about the chora. What?
Well, the chora is a 21 string or 20.
Yeah.
I believe some maybe slight variations, but the ones I've come across are all 21 string. This is not one I made. This is one I bought in a pawn shop in London in the 80s, and it's probably all a bit out of tune at the moment. But
What part of Africa is it from?
they're West African,
West African.
from Mali and Senegal.
Yeah.
That kind of region, and there's a very strong griot sort of presence in the or stories around the playing of kora music, particularly all West African music. But I found it fascinating because it's a harp which has alternate diatonic tuning.
Right.
So half the strings of one side of the scale and the other half the other. So, and it may well be that this instrument is what was originally taken. Nobody really knows, but to South America and became later on a contributor to the harp music that's used in
What's the
South America.
What's that made of? The sound.
Okay,
sound
so it's a Watting Great gourd, a big pumpkin, a bit like Indian sitars,
Yes.
made in the same way.
Right.
And then there's a cow skin, stretched, wet, and shrunk onto it. And traditionally, they seem to use these. This is an original one. They use these kind of upholstery tacks to hold the thing on while it dries. Few sticks of wood and a bridge. And that's it really. It's played held like this.
Yeah. Yeah, it does sound. It's very harp-like, isn't it?
Yeah.
And how many have you made?
Well, I've made a couple.
Yeah.
Which is the same. Funnily enough, the same number of roadkill deers.
Yeah. you
my
told me
freezer.
that you'd eaten a deer and they turned its skin into a kora.
That's right.
It's a very good use of roadkill, actually.
Yeah.
Well, maybe you'll come across a hedgehog or something to turn it.
Yes, I mean it is exciting. I'm drying a rabbit skin at the moment.
Yeah.
And possibly there might be something that will come out of that. A small banjo, a rabbit banjo, or something might come along.
Fantastic.
But I think I very much follow. I try to when I'm not sort of doing jobs for money, but I try to follow in the ideas of Francis Bebe and the African music is so rich simply because they made the instruments from what they found around them. So the variety of instruments and tunings and sounds come very much from the richness of Africa's biodiversity.
Well, it's wonderful. So just one last thing. What are your plans, if you have any at all, for the future, other than making this wonderful guitar which you're making? Do you sell these instruments to people, or what?
I do, but I don't actively promote the selling
Yeah.
of them. The sales that I've had tend to come through people I've just met along the way and
Right.
who've got interested. I don't make enough
Right.
for it, and I actually don't really want it to become
Yeah.
a big commercial thing, because it might detract a bit from my learning process, I suppose.
Yeah. And you wanted to become a filmmaker at one point, didn't you? So
I've had lots of ideas.
what happened to that?
yeah.
You should be doing this. This interview.
Well, yeah. Filmmaking is coming back to me slowly. I studied animation for 3 years,
Yeah.
and I made some films, and I travelled in Zimbabwe and
Wow.
made a film called Warthogs in the Mist, which was
Right.
a bit of a take on the Fosse story with the gorillas, but with a rather neglected animal, the warthog, that I thought deserved a bit more attention.
Not so
It was
pretty.
getting- I think they're rather beautiful. I spent a lot of time camping next to them, drawing them and
Right.
filming them,
Oh,
and then I
okay.
made a little animated film about them. So I've got a sort of quirky, again, what's now very much a hobbyist
Yeah.
approach to animation.
Yeah.
But yes, I mean, I love to travel, and I love
Right.
to discover music and creatures
Fantastic.
from all sorts of places. And I suppose my ambition is to carry on doing that.
Good. Well, Dan, thank you, and it's been a real bonus to meet you here in sunny Bridport. It's tipping it down outside, and thanks for talking to me and for showing me the wonderful instruments you've been making.
It's been a
And,
pleasure.
good
Joe.
luck with everything, and I hope it'll be before the next 40 years that we meet again. Bye.
Goodbye. And then. I once had a girl, or should I say, she once had me. She showed me her room, isn't it good? Norwegian wood. She asked me to stay and she told me to sit anywhere. I looked around and I noticed there wasn't a chair. I sat on her rug, biding my time, drinking her wine. We talked until 2, and then she said, it's time for bed. She told me she worked in the morning and started to laugh. I told her I didn't, and I crawled off to sleep in the bath. And when I awoke, I was alone. This bird